Welcome everyone. You are in the right place to see how to be a better contractor with your presenter, Carl Storms. Carl, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jana, and welcome everyone to How to Be a Better Contractor. And without further ado, why don't we go ahead and jump right in. So today's agenda, we're going to go through some introductions, some definitions, take a look at some industry trends, technology. We're going to talk about some BIM 360 stuff. We're going to do a summary, and then we'll have some time for some quick Q&A. As Jana said, make sure you put those questions inside the Q&A box, and we'll do our best to get them all answered. Introductions. So this handsome fellow here on the screen is myself. My name is Carl Storms. I'm a solutions consultant with Imagine It. I've been with Imagine since 2012. I live in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. It's always a little bit awkward to talk about yourself, so that's why I have this lovely slide that does it all for me. Some quick background that's pertinent to this particular session. I have worked in residential and commercial architecture, as well as with a large general contractor in a BIM VDC role, which will come into play in a little bit here. So, how my journey to BIM began. And BIM is one of those definitions that we're going to talk about, but this is a little bit of background that I think will become relevant here in just a moment. So when I was a wee one back in my elementary school days, I went on tour of the local high school just before entering high school, and when I went into the drafting lab, way back then that's what it was a drafting lab, I saw a bunch of cardboard models, kind of like we see here on the screen, even complete with the little fake green grass and the trees that you get from your local train hobby store, and I thought, that is really cool. That's what I want to do. I want to be somebody that gets to make those cool models. So once I started high school the following year, I began right away on the technical side and started to learn AutoCAD. Back then, it was in floppies. So as you can see from that little arrow there, that the entire AutoCAD program came on 4 floppy disks. If you're a wee bit younger and don't know what a floppy disk is, there's a great example. They didn't hold very much information. Those entire 4 floppy disks held less than 5 megabytes, not gigabytes, megabytes of data to put that whole program together. As you can imagine, it's much larger now. One of the other things that I was taken aback by and just sort of floored by the new school technology we were using was something called a plotter. So as you can see down here, back then we used what we called pen plotters, and what it actually did was it would pick a pen from the little carousel there and draw each line with the pen. And this was sort of earth-shattering back at the time. The downside was if you happened to have 2 or 3 or 12 lines sitting on top of each other, the pen plotter would actually retrace those lines 10, 12, however many times you drew it, and then you'd puncture the paper. And of course, once you punctured the paper, you'd have to restart the process again. So while it was cool technology, it was slow and prone to having not data breaches, but paper breaches. The other way new technology that we were starting with there was a tablet. So not the tablets that we know and love today, but a digitizer. And what we could do with this is instead of having to use our keyboard shortcuts with AutoCAD, we had the ability to pick the little icon for this digitizer, and the particular command we selected would happen right away on the screen. So that was sort of super cool technology at the time as well. Thankfully, the digitizer wasn't around for very long, because then they moved it from the digitizer onto the screen with our toolbars inside of AutoCAD, and we were good to go from there. So you're asking me, why is Carl taking me on this journey down memory lane to talk about this old, antiquated technology? Well, the reason I did that is because of a disclaimer. The name of this particular presentation is How to Make You a Better Contractor. And I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that I'm not very good with a hammer and a nail or any of those particular things. And my wife can certainly attest to that. So I'm not going to make you this super contractor that can handle multiple tools at once, and I'm definitely not going to turn you into this guy. But what I hope to do is, through this presentation, have you be more like someone like this, where you're able to use the technology that we have and leverage the digital information as opposed to rolled up papers. Or perhaps we get our, more like this lady here where we're on site, we have our technology, in this case a particular tablet, and we can see what's going on through augmented reality. If you zoom right in at that particular iPad, you can see that, well, if we look at the space, there's nothing there, but in the tablet, we can see the building that's going to be there. So with this presentation, I'm not going to teach you how to drive hammers or wield the wrench or any of that stuff, but I do hope that I'm able to lighten your view on technology that's out there and how that can make you a better contractor this in the 21st century. So some of those definitions that I talked about. So BIM, of course, building information model or modeling, depending on how you use it. And you're going to hear this term a lot. It's an industry buzzword, and it's something that's going around the entire globe. And what are we going to do? So instead of working with 2D plans, we're now working with 3D plans and database-based information. You may also hear VDC, and in fact, I threw this term out when I was running through my bio. What it stands for is virtual design and construction. And while some people will sort of interchangeably use BIM versus VDC, they tend to be a little bit different. VDC is virtual design and construction, and it deals with the actual contractor or construction end of the digital model that we're working with. And we tend to get a little more detail inside there, whereas with BIM, we tend to start with the design aspect to make that information possible, and it would move into possibly a VDC realm. IPD, integrated project delivery. This is our holy grail. This is what we're shooting for, where we get all the parties involved very, very early on inside of a project, the owner and his team. We create some sort of shared risk, shared reward environment, and we all work together for the better outcome of the project, and hopefully a better reward at the end. And the last one, and this is not necessarily a new definition, but new in the industry as far as how it's being used and adopted more and more, which is design technology. And design technology kind of takes all of that stuff and puts it in together. So we're not just talking about working with design models. We're not just talking about working with a software like Revit. We're talking about working with all the technologies that come with design and construction. So virtual reality, augmented reality, drones, laser scanning, all of that stuff comes together. So now we're looking at people that have the ability to look into and understand all of these technologies. And as we get further and further into the future, and we'll discuss this in a little more detail as we get further on the presentation, that we really are going to have to take the mindset of learning to use that new technology or get left behind. So now we're going to take a quick stroll through what's hot and what's not inside of our industry. So I'm going to start with this periodic table of BIM. The reason that I start with this one is because it's a nice little version of the periodic table of BIM. It sort of talks about all the things that you need to do if you're setting up a BIM project, or if you're not working with BIM, but you're going to be working on a BIM project or with somebody that does, it's good to know the background of what it is. And this is a really good way to get acclimatized to working with BIM. As you can see, it comes from the NBS, or the National BIM Standards. They're out of Australia, I believe, but that could be wrong. But if you click the source, it'll take you there, and not only do they have a great article that goes along with this image, but they talk about each individual one. But the real reason why I like to put this into my presentations and talk about it early on is because of the very first element, BS. Everyone usually chuckles and goes to the wrong BS definition, which is why I like to see that it pops out that it's actually BIM strategy. And that's absolutely 1000% true. But as you're starting out, you need to make sure that you have a strategy working forward. And whether that's we're just starting with BIM, we're putting our toe in the BIM water, or we're working on an entire IPD project, we need to make sure that we have a strategy moving forward. So what is the overview? So we see this little slide here, and it's been in several different presentations all around the world, so it may be something you've seen before. But really the idea here is as we're moving into this new age of using technology and the digital equivalent to our blueprints, we have all of this information. And the information starts from our conceptual design and it moves all the way through the entire life cycle of our product. So from design to building to operation, all the way around. Now, depending on where you are in that life cycle, you may just see your model is just that, just a model. As we get through building and really, more importantly, get into operations or the owners that are in place, we're going to realize that it's just data. The model is great. We can do great things with the model, but more important is that information lying within the model and what we're going to do with that data throughout the life of the project and the model itself. So when we're talking about contracting, the way that we build things really hasn't changed a whole lot over the last 4,000 years. We see how the pyramids were built way back then. They're still standing. They didn't have computers to use BIM, but they had a process where they planned, they scheduled, they executed, and they build. Same general idea. But we'll also see that the way we've done things, even as technology has changed, hasn't. So we take a look at these images here on the screen where we've got these brick layers over the years and the centuries, and the way that they actually lay brick hasn't really changed much. And you'll hear this a lot when we talk about, in general, the construction industry, how we've stayed the same for hundreds of years. We haven't really had a lot of change. And while that's definitely starting to move, that needle is rising, more technology is coming available, and there's more adoption, it's still quite slow. So why is it slow? Why don't we change? Why don't we quickly accept this new technology and get on the bandwagon, as the case may be? Well, of course, there's always our friend cost. It's going to cost us a lot of money to make these changes. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. It's all relative to the time and money that it's going to save you. We just said, our friend time. We don't have time. We're very, very busy. We don't have time to learn new software or new hardware or to take training. And of course, my personal favorite, he says in a sarcastic tone, we have always done it this way. How many times have you run into this when you've tried to implement or bring anything new into your workflow? Well, this is good enough because we've done it this way for 20 years. Why should we change? Well, hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll have an answer to that question. So why should we change? But in case you can't wait to the end, let me give you a few of those answers of why we should right now. Better communication. We are no longer just sending emails or writing things on charts or putting things on clipboards and take them into the job site trailer, putting them in a file. Hopefully someone takes that file, transcribes it, can understand our handwriting, makes those changes and passes along. We have much better ways that we can communicate and send information now. It improves the workflow, and the kicker here, we can start working with the actual data, not a version of a version of a version of something that may be the data that we want. Increase productivity. Once we get over that initial learning hump, we will find that there's a benefit for this technology and this workflow, which is why we're doing it. It integrates with other existing systems. We don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater. We don't have to reinvent the entire process to bring these new technologies into our existing workflow. We don't want to reinvent the workflow. We want to improve the workflow. And we have the ability to save our information and transfer information into other aspects of the workflow. So now that we've sort of talked about the whys, or the why nots, as the case may be, let's take a look at technology. So you take a step back and you take a look at an iceberg, very similar to when you're looking at technology. You know, we're only seeing the tip. There's so much more underneath that we don't understand or don't use. And a lot of times that's true. When you get a software, you learn it, you're still only using a tiny portion of what its capabilities truly are. So when we're thinking about technologies, let's get in our time machine and go way, way back and think about what was available in yesteryear, or yesterday, if the case may be. So my first computer was the lovely Tandy TRS-80. I'm sure some of you out there remember this bad boy and all the great things you could do, like going to Oregon or playing a logo. The first laptop, it wasn't too pretty, but it was something that you could move from point A to point B and type on. How about the brick? How many people had the brick? the first mobile phone. They weren't even cellular phones back then, they were just mobile phones, or car phones even before that. And the first tablet, okay? That's probably not the right kind of tablet that I want to talk about. How about this? So this was actually my first tablet, the Etch-a-Sketch, but still not quite the actual tablet that I'm talking about. What I mean is like a little computer type tablet. So this was the first tablet that was designed for the construction workflow and working out on site. As you can see, nowhere near what we're used to today, something small, convenient, easy to get around with. It was a big behemoth, and it came with a big behemoth price. So now we get back in our time machine and we go forward to today. And today could be like today, it could be yesterday, it could be, you know, a couple days from now, but it's current, present day. So obviously our computers have come a long way since the good old Tandy TRS-80. We now have so much power that things that we thought we would like to do that weren't available because of the horsepower of computers are no longer tied down to that horsepower. They've become much smaller, bigger screens, all the luxuries that we could ever want in a desktop workstation. Speaking of workstations, our laptops have gotten much smaller and way, 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 way more powerful. In today's day and age, we can have a laptop that we can easily carry around, take on the airplanes and where we need to go, that has almost the same amount of computing power as our typical desktop. And those bricks are gone. Now everyone has a smartphone, and they have way more power than all the stuff we showed on that previous slide altogether. In fact, the latest version of the Samsung, I think we're at 9 now, Galaxy 9, you can actually buy an adapter, which is a little dock, so that when you get to the office, you dock your phone, and that phone is your computer at the office. Hook up your keyboard, your mouse, and you run your entire life off of your phone. So who would have thought that that technology would be here and that we would have access to it today? And tablets, same thing. Everyone can have a different tablet, different platform, and the price is, you can pick them up for 99 bucks at your local Best Buy. How about some stuff that's a little bit different that wasn't even on our radar back in that previous slide? 3D printing. So now we can prototype things right on our desk. We can design it and send it out to our 3D designer, prototype it, test it very quickly without having to spend all this time to get dies, cats, all that sort of stuff. As in the old days, drones, or UAVs as we'd like to call them, are now becoming an everyday thing. Now they've brought down the restrictions to get access to them. They're very helpful on a job site for doing photos and inspections. Of course, laser scanning, reality capture, and the current favorite of the day, the BLK 360, which allows you to basically do laser scanning for a much smaller price pretty much anywhere. And I'm going to take a quick moment for a shameless plug. If any of you out there watching are thinking, hey, that Leica P50 scanner or that BLK 360 look really cool, I would love to learn more about reality capture and what those tools can do. We can absolutely help you out with that, just not in this particular presentation, but be sure to get in touch. All right, back to our regularly scheduled program. What's coming down the pipe for tomorrow? And as today could have been today, tomorrow literally can be tomorrow. As you're going to see, a lot of this technology is here. We just haven't harnessed its true power yet or have really seen widespread adoption. So it's not that this technology isn't here, but that it's not necessarily widely adopted. So wearables. And I'm not just talking about that nice new Apple II watch that you got that shows you text messages and knows how many heartbeats and steps you've taken. But the actual power of wearables that we're seeing now is the ability to put these wearables in a life safety vest that you use on the job site or in your hard hat. So if there's an emergency, if there's an earthquake, you can tell in real time how many people are still on the site and where they are. If someone has a medical event, you can find out that that's happened right away and pinpoint where that person is. So we have the ability to have all of this data right at our fingertips other than just having a watch. Another great example of that is you can track where people are. Now, sometimes people get scared of the whole Big Brother type of thing, but hear me out here. You have a wearable. They set up your tool trail on the job site that's, 50 steps away from where you're working for the next week. It can calculate how many steps you take every day. And then you have a use case saying, I know we set up the tool trailer over there, but we're working on the other side of the site. If we move this tool trailer, which will take half a day, we're going to cut our 3 hours of walking back and forth the tool trailer down to 20 minutes a day, and you can really see the information inside of that data. Virtual reality. Virtual reality has been around for a while, still slow to get to adoption and be used. But from virtual reality, we have seen the rise of mixed reality. And the subtle difference, if you can kind of see on there, is you'll see at the front of all these displays, it looks like they have little eyes. What those are is cameras and sensors, so that as you're working in this mixed reality environment that's very similar to virtual reality, it can sense where you are in the room and what you're doing. And some of them, even if you hold up your hands, it will scan your hands, and inside the virtual reality environment, you can see your own hands, which helps to remove the seasick feeling of working with virtual reality. And of course, we can't just have 2 realities, we need 3. So let's talk about augmented reality. And we see here on the screen, we've got some HoloLens, the DAQRI helmet, which is designed specifically for the construction workflow because your hard hat is built right in. What this allows us to do is have access to information and be able to see the real world at the same time. So we can still have a conversation with somebody and see them while we're watching a video or seeing tips or pulling up the specs for a chiller that we're working on or working with. So we have the ability to be present in our real environment and still have access to the information without going back to the job track to get on the trailer, or sorry, the workstation. 3D printing, and this is much closer than you might think. 6 to 8 months ago, they opened the first completely 3D printed office in Dubai. Not only was the office itself 3D printed, but all the furniture inside. And there are several prototype machines out there that are now the ability to print buildings at a very low cost in concrete. And some of them, even like shown here, will have a gantry crane included in them so that they can also put in the lintels and the beams, and there's just people there to make sure that things are in place. And of course, we can't forget the Internet of Things. What started as an industrial, a consumer revolution. We all have Alexa or Hey Google or whatever attached to our stuff. We can turn our lights, look at the camera if somebody comes to our phone. Well, this power is now coming to our job sites. So we have the ability to track information inside of our buildings. So what's next? What's coming? What's beyond? Well, here's sort of the artist's rendering of what the future job site could look like. And basically, as you can see, we've got sort of the wearables. We have people that are able to control everything from off-site. We have autonomous vehicles and machines that are being run. And again, this is much closer than you think. Companies like Volvo are already testing large trucks that would be working in large mines without cabs. There's no cabs at all. They're controlled by someone else off-site. In this particular environment, we could have that large crane that's controlled by a skilled operator in a climate-controlled environment that has the ability to access all that information without having to be in harm's way. So this is all coming, some sooner than others, but this information is coming. But what I really want to focus on in this particular slide is this part up here in the top corner, which is the connected, the cloud, all of our docs in one space, that central source of truth. And all of that is going to nicely tie this all together and lead us into talking about BIM 360 and why that is going to help make us all better contractors. So BIM 360 that's only for BIM managers. It's just a bunch of point products with fancy names, and you need a whole bunch of stuff to get it all in one. It's only for contractors. Nobody's going to do it if they're not working with 3D and if they're not working with BIM process. If you're still working with 2D, it's not for you. It's only on iOS. So if you don't have Apple, you're out of luck. And really, it's just glue, right? Like it's just glue. Well, of course, none of that is true. But those are a lot of things that I run into when I'm talking with people about what BIM 360 can do for them. There's a lot of misconceptions, information that's not quite right, or maybe they just haven't really looked into it. So what does BIM 360 do? Well, what it does is it helps give you the ability to access your data anytime, anywhere. Now, of course, there's always going to be tiny caveats to this in that if you have internet, you can access your data. If you're on the field and you have your Wi-Fi connection, Wi-Fi or cellular and you can access that, then you can access your data. But even if you're outside of a cell or Wi-Fi area, you can still use this information, and as soon as you get back into your connected environment, you can transfer that data to the rest of the project team. It's easier to deliver our projects because we have the right data at the right time. We're always connected with our team. We have this database of information that we're working on from the beginning of our project now right through to the end. And as we have more people come into our project, we can provide them access to it. So we're not reinventing the wheel. We're not sending several different versions of our data. It's all in one spot. And of course, because we're working with data, the underlying information in these models and documents that we're going to be talking about, we can now do analytics. So how are you currently dealing with your collaboration, design issues, construction issues, RFIs? How's all that stuff done? So is it something like this? We have connections where we're using an FTP site, we're sending emails, perhaps we're putting all the information on a USB stick and carrying it across town to somebody else, or maybe we're even a little further ahead of that and we're using a basic client like Dropbox or Box or something like that to store information. What we want to do is get away from that workflow and move into that central source of truth. A common data environment is a term that you're going to hear a lot, where all of our information is in one location. We know where it is, we know what version we're working on, and we know how to get to it. And also, just as important, we know who was the last person to upload, make changes, or touch our information. So some of the things that are good to know about working with our BIM 360 ecosphere are shown here on the screen. And when you put them all together, they help to reduce risk. But in reality, if we take a look at those ones on the top and to the left, your right, customer satisfaction, time, data reliability. If we have reliable data, if we're able to get stuff done on time, and our customer satisfied, well, then the cost is going to come down, the quality is going to go up, and the safety is going to fall behind. So while all 6 of those things are awesome, we see that the 3 of them help us improve the other 3. So now let's dive in to some of the products that actually fall under the BIM 360 moniker. And we're going to start with Glue. Glue was one of the original products that came out, BIM 360 Glue, as well as BIM 360 Field. This is sort of where you would find Glue in the overall scheme of a life cycle of a project. And I also want to sort of make clear that while this graphic looks very pretty here on the screen, that the segments, design, construction, pre-construction, all we have up there are all the same size. In reality, of course, some are much smaller or much larger than other. Operations would take up a huge chunk of this time if you're being accurate. So keep that in mind as you're working your way through, but it gives you an idea of where BIM 360 Glue is going to fit into a life cycle of a project. So when we're working with Glue, what it gives us is it gives us that one-click access to BIM. So that means when we're working in this environment, whether we're BIM savvy or not, we can simply get an email from someone that's working in the project, and all we have to do is click that little link. And when we click that link, we now are taken directly to that particular view inside of Glue and can see what we were meant to see, whether it's a markup or an issue or what have you. We have access to that right away, and we can see it without having to really know how we got there or why we got there. We just click the link and we're good to go. We have the ability to see clashes earlier in the project, which is kind of part of that IPD type of thing. If we're all getting together earlier on and find stuff virtually before we're doing bricks and mortar, building stuff in the ground, obviously we're going to get stuff fixed at a much cheaper rate. It's easier to change a model than it is to move some beams and some bricks and some mortar. And of course, this information is available in a mobile platform. So whether it's on our iPad on the site or on our laptop or in the computer in our job shack, we don't have to be chained down to our desks in the office now. And even if we're not the ones that created the data, so if our consultants from the architecture and engineering world are sending us the data through Glue, we can access it as we need it. One of the other nice things about working with Glue is the fact that it has add-ins. So if you happen to be working with, or your partners on the consultant side are working with Revit or Civil 3D, Navisworks, or AutoCAD, there's a direct plugin for Glue inside those softwares, which means we can very quickly work with that data, and it allows us to make changes inside of that platform. So in this particular slide, we see there's an issue with a Revit model. They'll get a clash notice from Glue. They can make that change, save it, and from right inside their authoring tool, send that information back up to the Glue project. We also support several different types of data, very similar to working with Navisworks. There's a whole bunch of different data types that we work with. So we're not just talking about Autodesk platforms. We're talking about all, well, I shouldn't say all, a lot of 3D platforms that are out there that we can work with. And this is just a partial list of what's out there and what's available. And as you can see, it's not just 3D information that we're working with. And of course, we have the ability to control access to who's working with what inside of our project. So that's always nice to know that we have that ability as well. One of the things that I talk about most when I'm talking about Glue and I'm talking with people that are going to be working on an active construction site, you may have sat through a construction coordination meeting. You know how long those meetings take, and this is a typical coordination workflow shown here on the screen. So we've got our design, our structure, and our MEP folks together. They send the model to the BIM manager. In this case, the BIM manager really can be anybody. It can be the model manager for the contractor. It can be somebody from the architecture wing. But typically in this coordination process, there's one person who's tasked with being the gatekeeper to collect all the information, vet it, make changes, and then send it back out. So in this case, we get all that information from our different consultants. The BIM manager finds some issues, passes it back along to those that need to make changes. Those changes are passed back to the BIM manager. You'll see design does it on Wednesday, MEP does it on Thursday. And on Friday, we have the coordination meeting. So most of that meeting is going to be spent coordinating all the information that we just got together. So we spend the majority of our coordination meeting actually coordinating the meeting before we can really spend time on the actual clashes or issues or things that we need to look at. So if we do this in a Glue-enabled environment, so if we're working with a cloud software like Glue, this kind of changes the workflow. What this does is this allows us to all be playing together at the same time. So we're all accessing that same common data environment with the same information. And as we're going through, we notice that there's an issue. Our MEP and structure folks can resolve those issues as they see fit. And as they put that resolved information back into the project, if it affects or causes issues with other information, so in this case, the structural update made some issues for the design team, well, they can see that information and start working with that right away. They don't have to wait until that coordination meeting to find out there's been an issue and go back and make that change. And typically, this means that we're able to resolve the issues and to deal with the information 20% quicker. So in a 5-day work week, that means, hey, we can take Fridays off. Sadly, in reality, Fridays usually isn't the day that we take off because of that, but it allows us to get back to work and get this stuff done. It also means that we've seen all of the information, the most current information, when we're having that coordination meeting on the Thursday. So we don't have to spend an hour of our 2-hour coordination meeting just setting up the meeting. That means that 2-hour coordination meeting is not only happening a day earlier, but it's half as long, and we can focus on that information. And for a lot of people that are sitting there that have been in a coordination meeting, they know how valuable it is to get that hour back. So now let's take a look at BIM 360 Docs. So here's where Docs sort of resides inside of the workflow. This kind of almost touches the entire life cycle and is, and as we see, will be the backbone for the BIM 360 platform moving forward. What this allows us to do is to get everybody involved in the project. We have access to our information on our mobile devices. We have access to our plans as well as our models working forward. Again, that same anytime, anywhere access. And more important is the fact all this information is stored in that one central location, so you understand what's been done, what's been changed, who changed it, and where it's located. And we also aren't just, even though we see a couple of Apple products on the screen there, it's not just an Apple interface. It works with Android as well when we're talking mobile. Again, the big thing, and we'll sort of touch on this later on in the video as well, but that single source of truth. So we understand where everything is and where it belongs and where it goes. But what can we do with it? I mean, sure, it's great to have this one spot where we can store all our data, but I can do that, as we saw, Dropbox, Box, what have you, Google Drive. But this is more than just a place to put your stuff. So we have the ability to manage issues, put in our markups. We can do all this stuff in this project environment, and so everybody can have access to it and see we've made those markups or have issues. You can even see that we can add those pictures in play. If we're working with some of that direct authoring tool, so in this case we see Revit or PDFs, AutoCAD, when we upload those models into our BIM 360 Docs environment, we can automatically extract those sheets. So that means the people on the team that have to go to the Revit file and then print it out to PDF or even just share the model out don't have to separate all the sheets, which is a very laborious process. We can just upload that content directly into BIM 360 Docs, and it does it for us automatically. We also have the ability to compare. A lot of you out there may have worked with a product called Bluebeam, a great PDF product where we have the ability to get two versions of a PDF and compare and contrast what's changed and what's different. We can do that inside of Docs natively. And we have the ability to compare 2D, but we also have the ability to compare in 3D, which takes it up to that next level of comparison, because not only do we see what's changed on the plan view, but we're looking at it in 3D, so some things that we might have missed in a plan view we can now see in a 3D compare and contrast. And as you see, we have the ability to not only do a compare side by side, but we can also do an overlay as well. BIM 360 layout. So this is actually a free tool. You can't see me, but I'm doing the air quotes. And the reason I'm doing the air quotes as well, the layout portion or the app that comes for your iPad is free. It does require a paid subscription to Glue to support the content on the back end. So what layout does, and again, as we see, we need our big brother Glue to play in the layout sandbox. But what layout allows us to do is it allows us to take our 3D information, or 2D if we're still in the 2D workflow, for example, from our Revit model, and then we can apply points into that data, and from those points, we can now go do layout with our total station or robotic total station directly from an iPad. So the old school way, a lot of people are still doing this, you know, boards and battens, we lay things out, we do some cross measurements, and we make sure where we're gonna dig before everything harks in place. You can see there's a lot of rebar, a lot of orange paint. So what we want to do is we want to get away from this workflow. Well, it's worked for a long time. It's still very error prone. So if we move into the BIM 360 environment, but we're able to do this with our iPad using the actual design model, in this case a Revit file that we built from, we're not as separated from the data. There's not that chance for that error as we're moving from different data source to different data source. And we have the ability to do step-by-step guides. The iPad will make sure we're in the right location with our total station. We can look at our information in 3D or 2D so we can understand it the way we need to understand it when we're actually in the field. And it gives us those cues. So as we're moving our device to the right spot, it lets us know with a beep, a little flash that we're getting closer and closer. We're on the right spot. We've got the point. And one of the things that we can do with this is, besides being able to do layout, we can also do QA/QC of work that's already done or work that's going to be done. So we can create our content inside of the products we have here, so Revit, AutoCAD, Navisworks, as well as with point layout. And then we take that information from that product and put it into our BIM 360 Glue environment. From there, we input it into our layout tool, BIM 360 layout, on our iPad, which we can connect to our device. Right now we work with Topcon, Leica, and there's always a third one that I can't remember, but if you go to the BIM 360 layout website, and Autodesk will tell you that third tool that it works with. And then once we've got the information, we can then turn around and say, okay, this is where the point's supposed to be, everything's laid out, it's built, we can go back and now do the as-built workflow, where we say, okay, that's where the point's supposed to be, but this is where it actually is. We can also do this with analysis once we've got the information. So again, we take all those issues, things that were supposed to be in one point and they're not, and now we can put that information into fields instead of inside of Glue. And from there, we're able to go to our site and track that as part of issues. So after we've gone in, used our layout command, let's say, to put all of our hangers for our NAP systems in place, we can then take that data, put it back into a product like field, apply it to a checklist or punch list, and then we can go back and QA/QC that stuff on our iPad in the field. Plan, or BIM 360 plan. We can see a little bit smaller window here, typically on our construction side, a little pre-construction, a little commissioning and handover. But what this allows us to do is to have sort of a digital representation of that pull planning, of that lean construction methodology, where we don't have to have all that time to put the tape on our whiteboard and put all of our sticky notes on there. We can now do this on our mobile devices and then track all of that information when it's done. No more hard drive full of pictures from weeks on end of our job board. And as we move our stickies around, it's now a mobile environment where we can track that information. It's not really meant to replace Microsoft Project or Primavera to do your entire schedule. It's more to take it down to your little 1 week, 2 week job window areas and chunk by chunk create that project as you're moving forward. So some of the things that we can do specifically in a little zoom in on what we have on the screen, again, short-term planning, we can track all this stuff. We have that lean principles if you're working with a lean project, which is becoming quite popular these days to do that in place. This subscribes to that theory, that methodology, and you're able to work that in quite seamlessly. And the last one that we'll look at from the BIM 360 realm before we kind of wrap up is BIM 360 Field. So BIM 360 Field is another one of those sort of original products that came out right around the same time as BIM 360 Glue. And this puts us firmly in the contractor's hands. During construction and commissioning and handover, it's a real QA/QC safety tool, checklist, punch list, all that stuff can be done inside the BIM 360 Field tool. So where does BIM 360 Field go? Everywhere. We've got this sort of active job site. We see all the different people that can play in the BIM 360 Field sandbox, if you will. We've got the owners, we've got the trades and the sub-trades, we've got the architects, the engineers, our project engineers that are on there that are making everything happen, our superintendents, our QA/QC and safety people. Everyone can have access to BIM 360 Field and be part of that project and part of that workflow. And what this does is it allows them the ability to make sure that what needs to get done, what needs to get tracked, what needs to get reported can do so. And so what this allows us to do is a lot of things. One, and this is a big one for a lot of people that are looking to get started and work inside of a BIM workflow, is sometimes it's a big step. And when you're going to go on a big journey, you start by taking that first step. And perhaps it's working a mobile device like BIM 360 Field that allows you to do punch lists, QA/QC on a 2D plan that you're used to working with. So yes, we're going to get to BIM, yes, we're going to get to 3D, but we can start right away with a workflow we're comfortable with this app doing 2D inspections. We have the ability to review all the information that goes into our projects. So 1 project, 2 projects, 3 projects in, we now have a database of information that we're working with. And if we see that we constantly have this one sub that's underperforming, we now have data, empirical data that says, hey, we shouldn't use this particular trade because they're always behind, they're always late. Perhaps we should try a different trade for that particular workflow. And one of the coolest things when we're working with BIM 360 Field is the fact that when we have our iPad, we go out into the field and do these checklists. We're always connected, and if we're in a field where there's a dead spot, there's no 3G, 4G connectivity, we don't have a Wi-Fi mesh on our job site, we can still use the checklists that we're supposed to do that day. We still do our workflow. We walk through, we check off our checklists, we go through, we be very productive, and at the end of the day, as soon as we walk back into the job site trailer or into our truck or wherever we go where we have connectivity, it then takes that information and syncs it back up to the project team so everyone that needs access to that information has it. We don't have to put our clipboard on the desk for someone to transcribe that information and put it into the project data and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. The information happens instantaneously. The other nice thing about this is when we're working with an iPad, it has a camera. So we see an issue, we can take those pictures right away, put them into our reports, and as that information gets synced, the pictures get synced. We no longer have to have the digital camera where we take the SD card out, put it on our laptop, transfer to a folder, put it to the, you can just see how there's more and more places where there can be an issue with the data and errors along the way. If we don't have that, if it's in one spot, a lot of that goes away. We get better, cleaner data, and we get it sooner. Speaking of pictures, not only can we take those pictures, but we can add markups and comments directly to the picture. And you know what they say, a picture's worth 1,000 words. So we can type out what's going on with the issue, but we can also take a picture and add to it. Now, a little caveat as we're going through here, if you're working with this on your iPad, well, you do have connections, so either 3G, 4G, or a Wi-Fi mesh. You have the ability to use the Siri integration in it, which means you don't have to type. You can just talk. Hey, Siri, there's an issue with this duct in room 305. It needs to be dropped 3 inches. Siri types it up, puts it on your report, or adds it to the picture. You're off to the races. We also have the ability now to bring in our daily weather. So when we're doing our daily reports at the end of the day, we can incorporate this in automatically. So you don't have to know what was the weather like, what's going on, why are we behind? Well, it rained for an entire week, and here's the proof. I have the weather data for that entire week. We also have the ability, once we decided that we've worked with field, we like the 2D workflow, to get into our 3D workflow. And what we do is we, again, partner field up with BIM 360 Glue as the back end and the engine that controls the 3D models. And we now have the ability to do all of our inspections and our walkthroughs on the site and incorporate that information into our 3D model. So to sort of bring all of this back together for the BIM 360 field world, it's for the entire construction team. It's not just for the people on the field doing QA/QC. Think about doing your CA as your designer. We can manage all of our project documents, safety documents, field documents, process reports, commissioning and handover. As we put those chillers in place, those boilers in place, we can track that when it was in place, when it was run, when it was second tested, third tested. We can even incorporate in the PDFs for the owner's manuals for those things. So when we're done, we just hand the entire thing over to the owner. And really, that's kind of it in a nutshell. Big thing is that real-time product or project analytics that comes with it. Well, you are going to start getting analytics instantaneously. The longer you run through the project, the more diligent you are with the information, the better that information is going to be. So to bring it back into for a summary, BIM 360 is a connected environment. We bring everything together. It allows us to put all of our ducks in one basket. We have the ability to have our office and our field always in sync. So those working in the job trailer, those working back at the head office that are working with the models and the content and the information, all the information is in one spot. We all know we're working with the most recent version of the information, so we're always on the same page. And it really is designed, BIM 360, the ecosphere, for the entire construction project. So it's not just when we're actually digging the holes. It's not just for when we're designing the building, and it's not for when we're handing the building over to the owner, but it's for all of those things. So the big question on everybody's mind is what's next? Well, what's next is it's going to be an even more integrated project, a more, integrated platform. It's going to be data-centric, so we're going to be concerned, we're going to be worried, we're going to focus on the data, the ones and the zeros, and less about which type of information we're getting, whether it's coming from Revit or Tekla or where it's coming from. We just want the data that's inside of our models, inside of our BIMs. And the way that Autodesk is going to do that is by setting everything on top of the Forge platform. Now, Autodesk announced that they were coming up with the next generation or next gen BIM 360 last year at Autodesk University. And the reason I showed you all of the original products, or classic as we like to call them, is they're all still viable, they're all still out there, they're all still solutions. But as you're working with those and getting comfortable, what's coming? And here's a quick sort of short distance future look at what's coming. So in the new BIM 360 world, the products are all going to sit on top of BIM 360 docs. That's going to be your common underlying central source of truth. And then we're going to set up different modules that are going to work depending on the stage of the life cycle of the project you're in. BIM 360 Design, which is replacing BIM 360 Team and Collaboration for Revit to give you the ability to do your design product. Glue is now going to sit on top of BIM 360 Docs and help you do your clash detection and pre-construction. A new product called BIM 360 Build is going to give you your field execution. So it's going to take all the features that you love from field, roll them in together, and set them all on top of docs. And then at the end, we can work with our BIM 360 Ops, which allows us to take that information and do simple job tickets and maintenance in our building once it's in place. And as you can see, all of that is going to be under the BIM 360 umbrella, and the data is going to be sitting on the Forge platform underneath BIM 360 Docs. So you really now truly do have that one central source of truth and all of our information in one place. And just some final thoughts to bring at the beginning to the end and wrap it all back around. Another version of that slide that we saw earlier, talking about building information modeling and how we're going to do this all together and how we can all become better contractors together. As we see, we've got that entire life cycle of our project. And this one we've even thrown in demolition because that's going to happen as well. And now we have products that go from beginning to end in a much shorter period of time than perhaps we're used to. An example that I like to bring up is that nice brand new stadium that they just built down in Atlanta, Mercedes Stadium, I believe it's called, Mercedes-Benz Stadium, where the Falcons play. Beautiful building, built with BIM. But the one that it replaced was less than 30 years old. In fact, I think it was right around 25 years old. So those really high-tech buildings don't stick around as long as they used to. So this whole process where we can start and end might be coming shorter. But I want to reiterate the idea that what we're dealing with BIM and with the content that we get is just one source of data, and that it really is the data that we're focusing on. And we saw that a couple of slides back where we said what's next, what's moving forward with the BIM 360 platform and the industry in general is that we're going to become data-centric. We're going to be focusing on the data and less concerned and less worried about the platform, where it's coming from, where the data was made. We just want the information that's inside of it. And that's why we really need to focus as we're moving forward and adopting these new tools that while a particular platform may be great, it's really the data that is going to carry on through the life cycle of our project. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up to questions.
Sure. One moment while I end today's recording.